Thank you. Welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa. Welcome to EWTN Live. We bring you guests around the world, and tonight our guest is an author or editor of more than 40 books, with a wide spectrum of people, including rock and roll Hall of Famer and hero of my youth, Debunking. I guess we could call him the runaround author. All the way to Scott Hahn, with whom he works at the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology. His newest book, which he co-authored with his good friend and scholar, James Papandrea, is entitled How Christianity Saved Civilization and Must Do So Again. So please welcome Mr. Mike Aquilina. Mike, welcome.
Father Mitch, thanks for having me back.
Good to have you back. But Dion, you know, I was listening to him when he first came out.
Oh, wow, wow.
Because I'm old, and so is he.
Hey, but he's still touring. You guys are both still rocking.
I guess we are. He was one of my favorites. He's a great guy. But it's cool that you get to work with someone like him and Scott Hahn, another great guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's terrific. This book is actually a re-editing of an earlier book
Yes.
and dealing with an important set of themes. You have 7 different themes in which you show how the Christian church saves civilization. And so our audience understands background on this. Many of them may have heard how it was the church that brought the Dark Ages. People who lived in what they called about themselves the Enlightenment in the late 1600s and 1700s. These Enlightenment people thought that the church brought in Dark Ages and made people into barbarians, and that the Catholic Church stopped people from reading and wouldn't let people read the Bible and excommunicated people who learned to read the Bible and things like that.
Urban legends.
Urban?
Urban legends, these are.
I call them flat out lies.
Well, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you, I take it, do not hold that the church invented the Dark Ages.
No, as a matter of fact, what Jim and I say in the book is that anything you like that's good and distinctive about Western civilization probably came from the church. Probably is a peculiarly Christian contribution to the history of civilization.
Well, now, wait a minute. You know, there was this great Roman civilization that had itself been strongly influenced by the Greeks. You know, once they conquered Greece, they loved everything the Greeks did because they were great artists and poets and playwrights and philosophers and scientists and doctors. So they loved the Greeks and they used a lot for their... I thought they came up with all the good stuff.
They did not have the idea, for example, of human dignity, of human equality, of human rights. These things are specifically Christian contributions to the discussion. It was Jesus Christ who brought these ideas into the world, and then Christians who introduced them to the empire. This is something new. There were also institutions that did not exist before Christianity. The hospital is a prime example.
Right.
There were no hospitals before Christianity.
Right.
Once Christianity was legal, you needed at least one hospital in every city. It became a standard feature. It was a mark of civilization. I'd say that most of these things that we have and enjoy and even love today about our society, about our culture, are specifically Christian contributions.
All right, now wait, these are big claims that you're making here.
They are.
Let's go through them one at a time.
Okay.
One of the issues that you bring up, you have a chapter on the human person. The Greeks reflected a lot on what it means to be a person, and the soul of the person and all that, and Romans picked up something from them.
Sure.
What did the church add when it comes to understanding human persons.
Well, this universality of human dignity, that your dignity is not based on how much money you have. It's not based on your aristocratic heritage. It's not based on the property you own. If you go back and you read the Greeks, if you read Plato, if you read Aristotle, you find that they assumed certain things. They assumed that women were far inferior to men. That
Well,
women,
that's true, they did.
women were perpetual adolescents, okay?
Yeah.
They assumed that children,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they believed that a man could not be friends with a woman because she was inherently inferior to him, and you can only have friends that are on a par with you, equal to you, and women just can't be. That
That's
was
right.
certainly a Greek idea. Yeah, that's true.
so women and children and slaves, and not only slaves, but laborers. Plato and Aristotle, both noble men, both big thinkers, obviously, extremely influential, but they believed that people who worked with their hands were innately inferior to people who had leisurely lives.
Well, the Romans thought that too.
They did.
They thought that if you had leisure, then you could get into politics, and that made you a good person.
Mm-hmm.
sorry. But they
Still
did.
true.
Yeah, they did think that, and that laborers were low, but slaves. I guess it is true that Romans thought that if you owned somebody, A, you could own them, and B, if you did, you can make them have your children,
Right.
if they're females. You can kill them anytime you want, in any way you want.
Right.
There was no, punishment for killing a slave.
And we're talking about a wide swath of humanity here. You know, there were times when most of the people living in Italy, in the boot, were slaves.
Yeah,
most of the people.
throughout the empire, it was about a third of the population.
So
So
you
that's
have,
pretty bad, and it was nothing to do with race.
no,
They enslaved anybody.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. You could have been delinquent on your taxes in one of the colonies, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to bring you to be a slave in Italy.
Right.
So these things happened, and you have all of these people who are lesser people.
And I guess when I think back on Roman law, if a father didn't like his child up to age 7, he could kill him.
That's right. The father
So
had
they
that
could
authority.
do, not only abortion, but they could kill their children up to age 7, and there was with impunity.
It rarely happened, but it did happen,
Yes.
and it was not punished. Right.
I guess that is sort of an attack on dignity. Yeah, that doesn't sound so good.
So Christianity introduced this idea of human dignity by proclaiming that everyone is made in the image and likeness of God.
Yes.
You know, that we're created this way, and we're created with this dignity, and that we're bearing that likeness in the world. It's not only our people, it's all people.
Right, and that this sense of having inherent dignity that God gives, the state doesn't give it to you, the empire doesn't give it to you, no social class gives it to you, God does. And that does make something of a difference. All right, so there you got that. All right. Now, what about family? Now, certainly the Romans had families.
And they believed in the natural family, just as
Yeah,
we
yeah,
do.
yeah.
One man, one woman, theoretically for life, and for the
Right.
propagation of children. All of this, theoretically, they would sign on to. But there were problems. You know, by the time of the empire, the Roman family was really crumbling.
And so folks understand, Rome started off for about 250 years as a monarchy. They had kings. And then it was a republic from 509 until 130 or so, 129. And then in 129 or 127, Octavian makes himself emperor, and that's an empire for the next few hundred years.
And his achievement was amazing, okay? He brought about world peace. That's no small accomplishment.
Well, even peace within the, for Romans, I mean, there were a lot of civil wars that have been going on.
Yeah.
And, from what, the 90s, all BC, all the way until 30 or so.
And
so 34. And so you had a lot of civil wars. He ended that.
he eradicated piracy on the sea.
Yeah.
He opened up trade routes. There was unprecedented economic prosperity. And the taxes were flowing into Rome, right? So everybody should have been happy. Everybody in the capital city was prosperous. But there was a problem. Already, people were kind of liking this leisurely lifestyle and were averse to having children. So they stopped having children. They stopped marrying then. So the Romans, especially the aristocrats, they weren't marrying, they were contracepting, they were aborting, they were committing infanticide. They were not bringing in a new generation of Romans. And Augustus lived to see this, and it alarmed him.
Well, what did he do about it?
He enacted laws, and they weren't very effective.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now, Octavian, Caesar Augustus, wasn't really a big family man himself now.
He wasn't, but he was an astute governor, right? He didn't live up to his own ideals. He only had one child, and she was kind of lived a scandalous life. But he saw that there was a demographic winter coming. There were no Romans to run the Roman Empire because the Roman aristocrats were not having children. So he tried to enact laws to make them have children. Right?
What kind of laws?
Well, he outlawed bachelorhood and spinsterhood.
Yeah.
If you remained a bachelor, or if you were a woman and you didn't marry, you had to pay heavier taxes. Your tax burden got lighter the more children you had. So if you had a large family, you were hardly paying any taxes. In fact, he was giving you money. There were all of these rewards for having children. You got money from the state if you had more children.
Well, I'm sure that worked then.
No, it did not work because, you know what? People looked at the fines. They said, I kind of like my long vacations every year. If I have kids, I'm not going to be able to have those. Kids create all kinds of problems. They bog you down. They didn't have children. And he tried to shame them into having children. He at one event, he separated the married men in the aristocracy out from the unmarried men, and he addressed both of them. First, he praised the married men, and then he tried to shame the others by saying, what am I to call you? You're not acting like men, so I can't call you men. You're not acting like citizens. You care nothing for the city. Do I call you Romans? You don't care about Rome. If people lived the way you're living, if all people did, the world would be depopulated. So he tries to shame them. It still doesn't work. They look at the fines, they say, I can afford that. And they pay the fines rather than having children. This remained a problem for the next 2 centuries in Rome because it just kept on keeping on and declining.
Yeah, and certainly when plagues began to come in the 3rd century, in the 250s and later, there were even more devastating drops in population.
Sure. And for the first time in its history, Rome outlawed abortion in order to get people to keep these babies, but it didn't work. Even when they did that, it didn't work. What's interesting is that they got to that point because they saw that the Christians were reproducing. They saw that the Christian marriages were lasting. They were lifelong. They were fruitful, and they envied that, and they tried to legislate it into being, and they couldn't do it.
No, it's, we certainly see in our own culture today, now the majority of adults are not married. That's and certainly the majority of children are born out of wedlock.
Sure.
That's over 52%, last figure that I heard. And so people just are not, and then of course we still have far too high abortion rates. Come down, but it's should be 0. So we do, and we have a dropping, we're not duplicating ourselves, not replenishing our population.
So Christians modeled healthy families, and they modeled happy families. And when sociologists look back on that, they speculate that that's really what drove a lot of the conversions to Christianity. People looked at these homes and they said, I want what these people have.
Right.
and they tried to live that way, and that's how people were brought into the church.
Sure. Well, this is important. All right, so the church add a lot on what it means to be a person, what it means to be a family, but you also talk about the importance of the church's change on work.
Yes.
Now, what do we contribute about that?
Now that's very interesting to me because it's something not a lot of people talk about. We do hear about some of those other teachings, but we really did change the attitudes on work. As I said before, Plato and Aristotle didn't think much of day laborers. Okay?
Right.
If you had to work with your hands for a living, you were an inferior kind of human being. But you think about it, Christians worshipped a man who worked with his hands for a living. And if you go down through the Old Testament, you find that so many of the heroes of biblical religion worked hard. Okay?
Yeah.
They were herdsmen. They were farmers. They were sailors.
Well, Jesus himself and his foster father Joseph were carpenters.
That's right.
And
You get into the apostles, they're fishermen, they're tent makers, you know.
Right.
They're hardworking men. And so there's this new dignity to work. And Jesus himself speaks of God as a laborer. You know, his Father is still working. You know,
Yes.
I am working, my Father's working still. So the fathers of the church really emphasized this in their teaching, okay?
Yeah.
And they told people to imagine themselves working beside Jesus Christ when they go out to their jobs. And the liturgy itself took this into account because you have this offertory where people brought the actual fruits of their labors into the church and placed them at the altar. The olives, the freshly pressed oil, the grapes, the wheat, all of these things that they had produced with their labors were
Right.
brought and placed at the altar. They're consecrating the world to God. So there's this dignity to labor.
And, you know, we still see that on May 1st, the church celebrates St. Joseph the Worker. We have the Feast of St. Joseph, but in addition, we celebrate St. Joseph the Worker. And that happens to be Labor Day in most countries except the United States. It was a day also used by communists to celebrate, you know, the Haymarket Street riots in Chicago back in the 1870s. But now the communists have had their final clearance closeout sales on statues of Marx and Lenin. They don't. I don't know how much they celebrate in Russia, but we do. We still celebrate Saint Joseph, and as someone who gives dignity to workers, rather than encourages workers to rise up and take over. You know, we see that there's a dignity to work.
Something divine.
Yeah, and this is something that, and in fact, even when you look back on, you know, the creation, God created the man and woman to till the soil and work with it. Now, also the meaning of religion has changed, and you mentioned religion and government.
Yeah.
You know, that these are changing. Well, what's changed there? Romans had a religion.
They did.
Often, you know, Augustus was the high priest. He was Pontifex Maximus. So is Julius Caesar. So what changed?
Well, scholars point out that there's a difference in the history of religion when you get to Christianity. You can't find too many instances of what we now call world religions that in a lot of those religions, the Greek and the Roman religions
Right.
especially, religion was a transaction. It was part of your life. It was not the totality of your life. Okay? The gods did not demand any commitment from you. You could move from one altar to another in the course of an afternoon. It didn't matter. You were offering sacrifice to the different gods, and that was perfectly okay according to their religion.
It wasn't so even much a deal that you love the gods.
No.
It's just that you don't tick them off.
Right, and it didn't make a difference.
That was a big concern.
It didn't make a difference in your life, really, unless you got what you offered sacrifice for. Then you'd say, oh, it made a difference there. But there was really no connection between religion and morality.
No,
Okay,
there were no Ten Commandments.
No, and the gods didn't live according to any norms of
No,
morality.
they were pretty bad.
They were above morality because they were gods, and they did whatever they wanted. They were adulterers. They were murderers. They were terrible.
Yeah.
But the gods themselves made no claim on your conscience. You could go your way. You could do whatever you want. It did not affect your relationship
Just
to the gods.
don't offend the gods. That
Right.
was what they did demand.
You please them through sacrifice,
Right.
and that's all.
That's it.
You know, you.
And the rituals had to be very exactly done, or else had to start all over and do them again, because the gods would get mad if you didn't do it exactly correctly, and you did not want the gods mad at you.
You're indulging the vanity of the god. That's what you're doing.
Right.
And that's the way it was. Now, Christianity came along and said, no, what God, the one God, is demanding is a total commitment from you, your entire life. He will have a complete claim on your conscience. He will tell you what's right and what's wrong. And you'll love him with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. This is something appearing on the scene for the first time in the history of religion. Now, it was there in the Old Testament, but this is really that being blasted out to the Gentiles, to the whole world for the first time.
And this was one of the reasons that the Roman government would persecute the Christians. It was this totally different relationship between the government and religion.
Sure. And that's the last revolution we discuss in the book, the revolution of the state. Now, what's interesting is that how did that come about? Well, in the Roman society, who made decisions regarding religion? Who decided which feasts would be celebrated, which gods would be honored?
The emperor.
The emperor. So we could say that the emperor really is above all the gods, because he's the one who manages their public cult.
Right.
He's the one who says, worship this one, don't worship that one. Worship this one on this day. I want all of you to be there. I want all of you to have the certificate.
Yeah.
So the emperor is above all the gods.
In fact, in the 280s, to sort of overcome Christmas, the emperor introduced Sol Invictus to be celebrated on December 25th, after the Christians had already been celebrating Christmas for 100 or 150 years.
Sure.
If not earlier.
So Christianity introduced this revolution in thinking about religion, and for the first time, the state was not in charge of all the affairs. The state was, in fact, judged by the God of the Christians.
Right.
And this is the first time we see this happening in history, that the states can be held to a higher standard, they had to answer to a higher authority.
Mm-hmm. They didn't set the norms.
That's right.
They had to answer to the norms.
And the bishops of the 4th century, 5th century, had to constantly be schooling the Christian emperors in this idea, because the Christian emperors resisted it mightily.
Yep. Yeah, even a pretty good Christian like Theodosian, he killed a lot of people and got excommunicated for that.
He had to be embarrassed publicly by Ambrose and disciplined in public by Ambrose before he could come back to communion.
And here's something, we see that the church stood up against these institutions because of their commitment to Christ and his teaching. They did what he demanded. They weren't trying to be revolutionaries against the government. They were just trying to be faithful to Christ.
Sure. They followed his example. And what do we see in his example? He paid taxes, right? He obeyed the laws. Yeah. And they followed him in those things.
Right.
They were, as they pointed out, they were better citizens than many of the Roman pagans.
But they still would be persecuted. Now, this brings us to what we must do again. Mm-hmm. We did this in the time of the Roman Empire and brought about a change. Just when the empire collapsed, the church was able to save what was good and move forward and invent European culture.
Yes.
What about today? Today, if anything, I see tendencies of trying to go back to some of these Roman models. Mm-hmm. And challenging the church not to interfere with what they're judging us by their standard. And this has been going on,
Sure.
Through the 20th century. That's why there were 40 million martyrs in the 20th century. We're still seeing that a lot of people who oppose the church are trying to attack us and make us go backwards from our position.
That's right, and they're doing it in precisely these areas. They're attacking these ideas like universal human dignity. They're attacking ideas like human equality.
Well, for instance, the idea that you can kill an unborn child,
Or even a born child now.
Now,
Think about this.
Yeah. The governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, signed that law, and the governor of Virginia wants to, and others are talking about it.
It seems to be fashionable now for politicians to back off when asked questions about whether they oppose infanticide. So we can see that this is creeping in at a rather alarming rate.
Yeah.
And
they don't seem to have a principle. I was listening to one of the candidates being challenged by a young man who said, look, I was born on this date and this year, and you are saying that it's okay. You're saying that I could be done away with the day before I was born.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not trying to attack you. I said, but you're saying that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, your mother could decide. Let your mother attack. We'll give your mother permission to kill you.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
No, the early Christians knew solidarity universally. It's not my people anymore. For the first time, we weren't thinking tribally. We were thinking universally. That's what Catholic means. And as Augustine pointed out, that's the real revolution, that the church could bear this name. And it's the first time in history, he said, that any institution could bear that name, Catholic.
See, at this time, though, we see people going to identity politics.
Yes.
Today,
Total fragmentation.
Is the anniversary of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's great speech. He hoped that his children and all children would no longer be judged on the color of their skin, but on the quality of their personality. That's
of the
Christian.
character. Yes.
He was a Christian minister.
Yes.
And he thought, but now we see people dividing over other identities, flat contrary to Martin Luther King's Christian principle.
Yes.
This is highly problematic.
Yes.
And what about we have, it's not in the Constitution, but our Supreme Court has brought us to a position of separation of church and state. And, how does that relate to the role of religion in government today?
Well, we can see the way that's being used. It's being used to kind of spank the church, move the church out of the position where it can judge any action of the state. We want to neutralize Christianity, silence that voice.
As a matter of fact, when Thomas Jefferson had written in a letter that phrase, there's a wall of separation between church and state, it was to protect the church from the state.
Yes, and that's where you really need the protection. If you look at the Emperor Julian, who in the 4th century tried to repaganize the empire after it had converted to Christianity, what did he do? He tried to remove Christians from the public square.
That's right.
He didn't make martyrs because he knew that martyrs just made more Christians.
Right.
The blood of the martyrs is seed of the church, and he knew that. What he tried to do is remove Christians from the professions, to make the professions so icky for Christians that they wouldn't want to practice them.
Right.
So move them out of education first, then out of law, then out of the upper echelons of the military, all the places where they could have an influence, and marginalize them.
This is exactly what Senators Feinstein and Hirono and some of the others have said. That they've challenged people on the fact that their candidates for judges are members of the Knights of Columbus and therefore are committed Catholics.
The dogma lives loudly in you, and that's a bad thing.
That was Senator Feinstein.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think she said that in a hearing about a judge. The Constitution prohibits religious considerations. And this is something that we're why are people doing this? Why are people trying to go back to this pagan mentality?
Well, I think it's Christophobia. It is a fear of Christ. It's a revulsion toward Christ, and wanting to drive him away, from the public square, because he's a threat to the things that many of these people are promoting.
Right.
The abortion license, right. this move toward infanticide, toward euthanasia, all of these things. To all of these things, Christ presents an obstacle.
And I'll never ever forget when the health care bill was coming up, and then Speaker Pelosi had said we have to include abortion. Think of all the money we'll save. She said that because they can't afford this health care bill. So if you don't let children get conceived or kill them in the womb, you'll save money.
Yeah.
And I said then, the next step is going to be getting rid of the old people, because old people are even more expensive than babies. Well, and for that sake, they're willing to do it. Look, we have to take a break.
Okay.
We're going to come back and continue this conversation and get you involved by you calling in for your perspectives on these issues and the impact the church can and should have in our culture. So please stay with us. Some questions?
I'm ready when you are.
Ready when they are. Tim, are you there? Is Tim there? Oh, no, it's not a caller. So there's somebody. All right. So somebody in Wisconsin sent this in. He's not on. What he said is, with so much corruption in the church, do people take her seriously anymore? This is a very important question.
It is an important question, and I think that the scandals have weakened the public voice of the church, the moral authority of the hierarchy. But we have to ask a couple of things. One, who is the church? Mm-hmm. The church for my next door neighbor is me. It's not the bishop. It's not the pastor. It's me. Mm-hmm. My next door neighbor knows I'm Catholic, and my life communicates to them what a Catholic life should be. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll be held accountable for that, and I believe that conversions come mostly and have always come through that kind of witness. Yeah. Not because a bishop is standing in the public square shouting at the top of his voice and really moving people that way. It wasn't that way in the early church. Mm-hmm. Okay, there were no mass media. So the bishops really had no mass voice by which they could reach other people. How did they reach the crowds? Through people like us, right. Ordinary people who were living in ordinary neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So the moral authority of the church does not depend so much upon the bishops as it depends on the quality of the lives of individual Catholics and their families, their homes. Are we living so that our homes are attractive to these people? Father Mitch, I cannot think, and this might be scandalous to say, I cannot think of a period in history when bishops were the shining light of the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Can you?
I don't want to get in trouble. Well, here's what I would say is that there have been a number of periods. This is about our fourth period of major corruption. You know, back in the 4th and 5th century, we had the majority of bishops were Arian heretics.
Yeah. And yet people look to that as a golden age.
Yeah, because there were some great saints.
That's why. And there are great saints today.
Yep. And, you know, in the 11th century, and the 10th century and the first half of the 11th, it was horrendous. It was worse than it is now.
Much.
But you know, then I can look back and see that it was, you know, great bishops and cardinals like St. Peter Damian and Pope Gregory VII and a number of others who really did make a change.
And not only that, but I would say many thousands of Catholics whose names we'll never know, who lived their faith in heroic ways in neighborhoods and made a difference in the lives of their neighbors.
Yeah.
I really believe that that is the engine of history. It's not so much the stuff we find in the documents. It's not so much the stuff we find in the archives. It's the stuff in the lives of ordinary folks in ordinary neighborhoods, living their faith day to day in a way that's attractive to their neighbors.
Yeah, it is amazing that when you look back on how awful the 10th century papacy was, it was worse than the Renaissance by far.
Oh, yeah.
But
Benedict IX.
That's also the same century when the Slavic people are evangelized and whole new areas, and the Norsemen, the Vikings were evangelized, and it changed their culture. You know, I'd say for the better. You know, so yeah, it's, and again, you can see where there were great changes in the among bishops and cardinals after Paul III, you know, during the 16th century. And you did see a lot of rise in some good holy bishops. And we've been blessed, you know, in our American history. A lot of the bishops have been excellent missionaries. But we've got a period of weakness, I think, due to the sexual revolution. That the church scandals come when church leaders, the clergy and the bishops, some of the cardinals, the problem comes when those clergy accept the principles of the secular world, when they act like the culture.
Yes.
That's when they go down. Yes. And they become oftentimes worse than other folks in the. It seems worse because of the kind of crimes they do.
So we are hobbled a little bit.
Yep.
But I would say, you know, again, the history of the early church should give us hope, because we have much more at our disposal. We have many more resources than the first Christians had, and the Christians through those first 250 years had.
Yeah.
And yet the church grew during that period at a steady rate of 40% per decade. 40% per decade. We have so much more today, and we're nowhere near that rate.
Yeah. There's something, you know, too. I emphasize the caving by so many people in the church at the sexual revolution. Right when the sexual revolution really kicks off in 67, 68, 69, that late 60s period. And it wasn't just the United States, it was in Western Europe too.
Yes.
And Pope St. Paul VI wrote Humanae Vitae to stem against that. He could see that the issue was this isolation of the procreative and the loving part of sexuality in marriage. That isolating sex from procreation and focusing only on love without procreation, that defense of traditional Catholic teaching was just met by an onslaught by theologians, the bishops of Canada in those days. They fought against him, and many other bishops refused to teach it.
And Pope St. Paul saw that once you sever those two, once you separate those two, you no longer have a coherent sexual ethic. After that, anything goes. And he predicted it, and people rolled their eyes.
Yeah.
That would never happen. And look, we're living it.
Exactly. I remember thinking, I agree with him. I had no problems with Humane Vitae. I didn't disagree with him, but I said, boy, I think he's overstating the case. That's going to make more abortion and, increase same-sex issues and divorce and all kinds. And
it's amazing how quickly it happened.
How quickly, and, church people not only disagreed with Humane Vitae, but they began to live out this separation of sex from procreation.
Yes.
And a lot of the scandals in the church are living that out. That rebellion against Humane Vitae is what folks have been living out.
And when they're compromised, you end up with this situation of clericalism, right? Where the laity and the clergy both aren't living the lives they should be living, but there's this tacit understanding between them. You don't bother us, we won't bother you.
Right. And I think this, is a decline, because the Romans had made that same separation, what you discussed before.
Sure.
In terms of the breakdown of their family. They had isolated sex. They wanted a lot of sex.
Yes.
And there's lots of pornography all over the walls of Pompeii and Herculaneum.
The literature is about little else.
That's right. The longer the Romans wrote plays, some of their first plays were, interesting, trying to imitate the Greeks. But they ran out of good ideas, so they just talked about sex, because you always get a laugh out of that.
Yeah.
And get an audience. And we've seen the same decline in the quality of our entertainment industry. You put in some sex in there, and you place that in there, and you just then it's easy. Yeah. The country music and other forms of music, just put in sexuality. It's a formula.
Yes.
That requires no artistry.
Yeah. Pompeii really freezes that moment in time with
Yes.
its pornographic wallpapers and that sort of thing.
There's nothing like a volcano to destroy you in the midst of your licentiousness.
Yes.
To make you an icon of that.
Yes.
And this is something then where we say, all right, this may be what happened. These are some of the things that went on in the church and that we're dealing with. What did the early church fathers do, and what must we do to be that force that counteracts the decline in the culture with the impact of God's grace in the teachings of Jesus Christ?
I think it requires clarity in teaching for the sake of the people who are in the church. We have to communicate very clearly what we expect of a Christian life, what Christ expects of our lives, all right? That has to be communicated very clearly. I don't think it has been. I don't think that Humane Vitae, the message never got out. I was growing up during that time. It was not communicated very clearly. Dissent was communicated very clearly in the news media.
Right.
Okay?
So, and the media, first of all, that priests were speaking out in dissent against a papal encyclical the night it was published. And that night, it was a Sunday when it was promulgated. That night, there was a news conference by theologians up in New York City, and they were running it down. That's news, but then it's also something that the contemporary media itself is gangbusters in favor of abortion. I've heard people seem to exaggerate by saying abortion is the sacrament of the progressive part of culture. But it's not just so much an exaggeration.
No.
I remember one ex-Catholic who was a professor of theology even after she left, and she wrote that, a ceremony to celebrate abortion as a sacrament.
Yes. And anytime you touch on these ideas of family and reproduction, you touch a nerve.
Yep.
You touch a nerve. And that's what happened with so many of the Christians. Read the lives of the early martyrs, especially the women martyrs. We find certain classes. One, consecrated virgins who were exposed as Christians because they refused a marriage proposal. Okay, the Romans tended to marry their women off, the few women who managed to survive.
And they had no qualms about marrying off their little girls either.
11 years old.
Yep.
11 years old seems to be an average. Wow, that's pretty young.
Yeah.
Somebody is trying to find a wife, some rich guy. He proposes to a Christian girl. She says, "No, I've consecrated my virginity to Jesus Christ." So he exposes her. This is revenge. And she dies as a martyr. Another class of martyrs, women martyrs in the early church, seems to be women who converted to Christianity and then refused to continue immoral sexual practices with their husbands. And the husbands then wanted to get rid of them without paying back the dowry, right? So they exposed them as Christians so that they could be executed that way.
Right.
So these are entire classes of martyrs. We see that what happens when you touch on these issues of sexuality and reproduction. Robert Louis Wilkin wrote a really good book, The Christians as the Romans Saw Them. And he tries to engage the Romans sympathetically. And what he concludes is that the Christians were upsetting all of the Romans' family values. Okay? The Romans were saying, you Christians are messing up all our customs. You're living in a way that's different. You're making our wives want to live that way, and we don't like that.
Right, right.
And I think that's what's happening today. It's the same dynamic.
And I think we see this from the media. But again, what we then have to do as Christians is not say, well, we don't want to get anybody upset, so we'll back off. Is that the response?
No, we have to be kind, and we have to be kind in the way we state things, right. But we have to state them, and we have to state them clearly. Sometimes kindness stings, right?
Yes.
When I go to the doctor has my best interests at heart, right? But sometimes he stings me.
Yeah, and this is something that we as Christians need to lay out, that this is our Christian faith and our Christian morality.
Yeah.
And not only that, well, we do it differently than you, and you have your way, and we'll just learn to live together as you do your thing and I'll do mine. We're saying that the way of the culture, the way the culture is reverting back to Roman style, is going to bring down culture. It's going to it's self-destructive.
And it will make you unhappy.
Yeah, make you miserable.
And I suspect you're already miserable.
Well, when I see them on some of the news programs, they do seem pretty miserable.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch some folks in the news when they talk about religion, not just the scandals. Again, in the scandals, we have to have a lancing of that boil and a cleaning out of the infection.
Yes.
There's and all the way as high as it goes or as low as it goes. But that's also Christian, that there must be thorough repentance. If some of the bishops are acting like Judas Iscariot, who himself was a bishop,
yes,
that denied Christ for money,
right?
Well, then we have to say this is a Judas Iscariot, and if priests are doing that, we have to say the same. But then we also have to that's the dealing with the problem. We have to have a positive impact on what we say to the culture and be consistent, because the gospel is salt that will preserve culture from its own decay.
And I want to emphasize again that I'm not only talking about what pundits say. I'm not talking about what media people say, what Christians in media say. I'm talking about the way we live. I'm talking about what we say at the water cooler at work. You know, how we live day to day, how we interact with the people in our workplace. Are we showing them a better way? Are we showing them a life that they would want to have? Are we communicating the kind of happiness that comes from living a life that's in tune with the natural law, with God's law?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, this means that we bring our morality, what we know, that's why it's important to reread the section in the Catechism on the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
Because thou shalt not steal includes issues like you can't bribe politicians so that you get a building permit.
Yes.
Or some other favor. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to bring the Ten Commandments into your business. Mm-hmm. You have to bring it into your family. You have to bring it into your politics. This idea, well, that's my religion, I don't. No, you bring the moral teaching of Jesus Christ into the way we vote and promote issues or go against issues.
Yes.
This must be everyday life.
That's how the Roman Empire changed.
Yep.
It changed because so many of these people came over to the Christian way of life. And when they did, they made an impression. Even Galen, the physician, who didn't have much use for Christianity as a philosophy, he said it seems more a superstition. But he had to admire the Christians for their courage in living according to their principles. And not only that, but for their courage in facing up to real danger. You know, Christian doctors, physicians, went in and treated patients when it was dangerous to do so, when they would take the disease upon themselves by doing so. Yeah. He saw that and he admired it. People need to see what ordinary Christians are doing so that they can admire it and want it for themselves.
Right. You look at, in the early church, there were Christians who would go to the garbage dumps every night looking for children, because Romans would take their children, and if they didn't want a baby, they thought it was defective, they put it in the garbage dump.
Right, and they could excuse that. Romulus and Remus were rescued by a she-wolf. So if the gods smile upon this child, maybe a she-wolf will come along.
Well, Jesus Christ smiled on them through the eyes and the mouths of the Christians who would go pick them up before the slave traders got them to sell into slavery.
Right.
And this was very much, you know, the role of the church. And that's why we also invented not only the hospital, but the orphanage and the university.
Yes.
And we bring our faith into the university.
And the hospice, and the hostel. All of these institutions that were there for sacrificial giving for the sake of another person. Yeah. These things did not exist before Christianity, and I don't know that they can exist apart from Christianity.
And we see today that folks who are in the secular universities, especially the Ivy League, have less freedom of speech and less sense of dignity of everybody speaking than they did in a medieval university.
Yes.
You know, the Inquisition makes these folks in the modern universities make the Inquisition look good. You know, this is something that we want to see we overcome. I want to point out that you have a website.
Yes.
It's called fathersofthechurch.com. fathersofthechurch.com. You can learn a lot more about the fathers. You have the writings of the fathers there?
I have my writings about the fathers there, and I have links to my books.
And you can also go to EWTNs.com, religious library, our documents library, to find out more about the fathers. But also this book, How Christianity Saves Civilization and Must Do So Again, by Mike Aquilina, James Papandrea. It's available at EWTNRC.com, our religious catalog. It's item 7190. And if you want to get some concrete ideas of what you can do, this is not a bad book to have to give you some ideas of what past Christians did. thank you very much for joining us. And may Almighty God bless you all and keep you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And do keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill, because we get a lot of bills, especially these summer months. We need your help a lot. God bless you and thank you.